All right. Hi, everyone. You have to excuse me. I just got off the slopes, so get the gear off in a minute. But for the millions of people watching virtually this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, welcome to day one of Winter Adtech virtual event. Thanks for stopping by our panel here this morning or this afternoon, titled "Let's Be Direct: The Opportunities, Challenges, and New Requirements to Fuel Growth in Direct Buying Models." We have a wonderful panel today. If everybody could just turn their videos on, you can see everybody. Thank you. All right, perfect. I will let Pilar, Sean, and Rich each introduce themselves. I'm certainly not going to attempt to pronounce any of their last names, let alone even maybe my own. In fact, if anyone out there can, for you, we have a prize. I'm just kidding. But seriously, we have four wonderful panelists for this session who will give some time for introductions. But in order to keep this interesting, I promised them that I would spring a random question on them this morning right at the start. So when you introduce yourself, please let's go with your name, company, title, what you do. And because this panel is all about direct, I want to know, what is the first direct flight you'll be taking somewhere once the world is back to normal post-pandemic? Pilar, let's start with you, and then followed by Rich, and then Sean.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for the organization. Well, my name is Pilar. I'm country manager at Taboola in Spain and Portugal. I joined Taboola 2.5 years ago to increase the growth in the markets. And for those of you who don't know what Taboola is a leader content discovery company. And I've been involved in Programmatic for the past 7-8 years. So I had the opportunity to see the growth, especially in Europe, but also in the US from the agency side and from the publisher side. So as I said, excited to be here. And regarding your question, by the way, it's a great question. I've been thinking about the direct flight I could take, and my answer is San Diego. I would love to be there back again. I love that place. Unfortunately, we don't have direct flights from Madrid, so I need to make a stop, but it will be fine. So hopefully I can be there soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Name is Richard Kanolik, and I head up Programmatic for Vodafone here in the UK. I have got an agency background, so I spent 7-8 years agency side at Omnicom and 7 Stars. And where I would go, where my first flight direct would be, I would have to say somewhere very hot, very sunny, to sit on a beach. I'm going to go with the Maldives.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Seun Odeneye. I'm the Managing Director of UK Ireland and Matterkind. Matterkind is IPG's addressable arm. My background is programmatic, but I work across all addressable channels, so search, social, display, video, native, and the rest. And my direct flight, my first direct flight, it's a really interesting one. It's my wife's birthday in June, so we're going to be going to the Caribbean. So I'm imminently about to book that. But the question is, would it be a direct flight, given the fact that if I get an indirect flight, it's cheaper? So that could probably talk to some of our topics today around, are we going to go the more expensive way or the cheaper way? Given the current climate and the economy, I'll probably go for the cheaper one, but I don't think my wife will be displeased.
I like that. That was perfect segue for the panel today. So thank you. So hi, I'm Michael Sadicario. I lead Smart's demand efforts in the US, and I hope to see my colleagues in Paris sometime in 2021. That's where I will be going direct. Now onto the topic. Well, first of all, actually, let me say, if you have any questions, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of the panel. So please use the question and answer function in Zoom here, and we'll jump into those at the end. Perhaps if you've seen I did a panel last in the summer, we might answer some of these questions in the middle if I can see them. So please feel free to ask them when you have them. So panel ready. First question. According to eMarketer and others, but according to eMarketer, growth in PMP and ad spending was going to outpace that of open markets by 3-1 in 2020 and then beyond. I guess the first question I always like asking is, do you agree with the premise of this panel and that there's actually a trend that buyers and sellers are moving to more direct buying models, and that trend will continue. I also want to know if this varies by country, brand, agency, platform, publisher, and so on. Seun, I'm going to shift this one over to you first, if you don't mind, since you provided the great segue to answer this question.
I'll try and continue that train of thought then, because I love the way that you said that it's predicted in 2020, but actually a lot of predictions for 2020 didn't come to come to light. Why? Because obviously COVID-19. So what will be interesting to see is actually from the prediction, what is the reality, right? The prediction may have been that because actually the economy was different, and actually going back to my Caribbean example, people would pay a premium or whatever it is. So it was just good to know whether that is actually the case and has it surpassed to those percentages. But in reality, if I was to answer the question with a yes or no, I do agree with it, yes, because that's kind of the way that the winds blow to some degree. But ultimately, for me, it varies by brand, it varies by objective, right? It's not a one size fits all. Let's take, I'll probably choose clients that I used to work with. Let's take a Chanel, for example, right? A Chanel would always want to be on 100% share of voice on a placement that they deliver on. So on a client like that, open market, there's no place for open market in their mind, because if they want to be on 100% share of voice. But then on the other degree, right, you take a Sky who believe that every single human being walking with a pulse is a potential customer for them, right? So then therefore, in that type of world, they want to try and deliver scale at mass, and they want to deliver them quick and effectively under a certain ROI. So therefore, open market might be for them. But for Sky, they might still tailor their messaging based on the audience, the environment. So like I said, if I was to sum it up, it's not a one size fits all. Different strokes for different folks.
Thank you. And Rich, does that speak to Vodafone? I mean, you have varying experience but like for you right now in your role, do you see it as a trend for your company, for your organization?
Yeah, broadly speaking, I think it's fair to say that that's what we're doing, and that's how the market's moving as well. I think buying through kind of direct routes, whether that's PMP or PG or even audience guaranteed now, which has been a bit of a buzzword in the industry for a little while. It's all around sophistication, and I think in its entry point, Programmatic was able to facilitate kind of open market buying. But then as the technology has become ever better, and as we expect more from Programmatic as a buying method, going down those direct routes gives you that opportunity and allows for that progression. So I think that's ultimately the reason why we're seeing that shift. I agree with Seun that it's not one fits all, and different brands will have different nuances where they need to still buy via the open market. But I think the more people start to invest, the more they can get out of Programmatic through those kind of direct buying routes.
All right, and Pilar, the floor is yours.
I think it really depends on the brand. I totally agree with that. But it's true that, for example, in Southern Europe, we're seeing bigger numbers. We're seeing how this is increasing on a daily basis. Also, I guess the agency and the brands are really focused right now on the the transparency and the benefits of those PMPs. So it's something I can see on a daily basis. And I think the data is increasing, and it will increase more for 2021. I think the PMPs are getting really important, and they will be more important in the next years to come, definitely.
All right.
Okay. Michael, can I just add on that as well? You mentioned country, and I think that speaks to people's buying routes as well, because in the UK it's quite a complex ecosystem of lots and lots of different publishers. I can imagine in a more simplified publisher environment in Europe or in Asia somewhere, that it may be that kind of buying route's not so prominent. So I think that definitely does have a role to play as well.
Well, while we're picking at it, I also said by platform and publisher. So Rich, do you see that changing that way as well?
I think the platforms will look to kind of innovate based on the trends that we're seeing. And if the trend is that people are looking to buy through kind of direct buying routes, then they have to have that functionality in there in the platform, or they kind of risk falling behind. By publisher, I think from a publisher point of view, they're not going to say no to open market spend, but I think they'll always want to kind of deepen their relationships with advertisers and with agencies. And I think being able to kind of facilitate direct buying routes enable them to kind of develop a better business model with that said advertiser and be able to forecast better their side, and you can really kind of do some progressive stuff that you wouldn't be able to on the open market.
I would say with that, Richard, though, I guess from a publisher point of view, of course they would want it, right? So I worked at publisher side 10 years. Why do they want it? It's guaranteed they've got more control in regards to the demand that's coming, and their yields will increase, right? I don't necessarily think it's an automatic guarantee that it's the best thing for a demand side, though. Don't get me wrong, there's benefits for both. But I mean, from a supplier point of view, they would always want you to deliver on a deal, on a direct deal, right? Because they're guaranteeing that money as opposed to open market, it's not guaranteed, and they're maximizing the yields. But I guess I've got the issue, and you've got the issue as well. We've got to balance our demand side criteria, and across a portfolio of clients that I work across, or my team work across, I need to work out what's best. And I mentioned before on a campaign by campaign basis, but it's not, in my mind, it's not always direct is always best and the right thing to do every time.
Sean, I want to go back to you on the criteria part, but before I do, I actually want to see if there's any challenge to that, because Pilar, you sort of, represent on this panel at least that's more of the publisher side. Do you agree with what Sean and Rich were just saying?
I think from the publisher side, there are a lot of benefits to go direct. Obviously, when you control your inventory, you want to monetize it on a different way. And at the same time, you offer real value to the advertiser. So you have control of the demand, as you mentioned. And at the same time, not only from a platform, but from a publisher directly, it's, and I'm talking about my experience too, it's a more efficient way to have your forecast, your transparency to the demand, a more direct relationship. So that's the benefits, I think, versus a challenge when they go open directly, or you don't have that control of your demand. Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to spend more time on that, but let's go back to Sean about the demand side criteria. And then Rich, maybe you can fill in the gaps if there are any after Sean, but what are those demand side criteria you're looking for at this point for going direct?
Are you kind of talking to what the benefits of going direct, or from a demand side?
Sure. Yeah, some of the benefits, like what does it need to provide you as a buyer at an agency in order to incentivize more money going direct?
Well, I guess when you break it down from a buyer's point of view in regards to, I guess, the benefit or why we would go direct is, I guess better negotiated deals would be one with the suppliers. And I think Rich spoke to that a bit earlier. No need for any major or big supply path optimization project, because in going direct, I guess in the very there's that essence that it is direct, and then there's no necessarily need to really invest in some supply path optimization project, right? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. There's benefits to do both. But ultimately, I think the key one for me is probably the layering of publisher side data, right? Which is becoming ever so important now in a world where we're talking about a post third party cookie world, right?
And Rich?
Yeah, I echo what Sean says. I agree on all fronts. I think it's a more transparent buying route. It's a one-to-one buyer with a publisher that you trust, so you know exactly where your revenues go. So there's not as much need for that SPO element. It deepens your relationship, and I think obviously relationships are always good, and you can do some better, more pioneering work when you work closer with your chosen preferred partners. Cost definitely one, data another, and then off the back of that, you can then analyze the performance of your campaign and work with the chosen publisher on PCAs, and then you can feed back that data piece into your kind of next campaign. And if you're going through the open market, you may be limited in some aspects in what data you can get hold of and what analysis publisher side that they're willing to give you.
I have to tell you, as somebody who's worked on the publisher side for my entire career, when I hear buyers, when I hear Sean, when I hear Rich, and I hear you guys say something like negotiation of deals is a benefit for you, and Rich, you just said cost is a benefit to you, the buyer. I'm wondering, does that mean lower CPMs for publishers? Is that a benefit to them? How could that be? And Pilar, are you seeing that? Maybe I'll start with you. Are you seeing that? Are we seeing lower CPMs with direct deals because of the strong negotiating powers that a buyer might have over a publisher?
I wouldn't say lower CPMs. Actually, I also been for a long time on the pub side in my career. And when you go direct and you have this conversation, you force the relationships. And actually, the main goal for a publisher could be monetization. So in a lot of cases, we see higher CPM and we see like a direct relationship where you can monetize it. And again, it depends on the campaign, as we were talking at the beginning of the session. But I wouldn't say lower CPMs, and I would enforce like, the demand and supply. They have a like really important part here, and work on both demand and supply sides. So from my point of view and from a publisher side, they will have the benefit and better way to build this relationship and monetization. Yeah.
You think about it from a publisher's side, right? It's about yield management, right? So I can sell 20% direct, 30% open market. I've still got 50% unsold. So therefore, my overall yield is X, right? Because you've got that 50% unsold. So while holistically, I think publishers will have higher CPMs. On a deal-by-deal basis, you may, from a demand side, you may get it lower, because of your buyer power. But the supplier also benefits, because instead of getting 2 million impressions, for example, from an open exchange buy, they're now getting 10 million guaranteed, right? So it's that trade-off. But that trade-off doesn't always happen, right? That sometimes the trade-off is just sometimes people just hear direct is better, and we'll probably get into that conversation later on. Direct is better. So then, therefore, they negotiate a deal from a demand side, and they're paying more. Suppliers getting more. Suppliers happy, brilliant. Demand person's paying more, but they don't know why they're paying more. They're paying more because the industry told them that direct is better, but they don't understand why they want to do direct. That's why, for me, it's always got to come back down to something. What are you trying to achieve for your client? What's the overarching outcome? And actually, whether I'm paying 2 times more, 4 times more, if I'm able to deliver the outcome, it's almost irrelevant, right? And it's that value trade again.
Rich, are you okay with paying more? Are you okay with paying more for the guarantees and the all the other benefits you mentioned earlier around working with a publisher directly?
I think you're not going to pay more for the sake of it being direct. Like if you're, because there's ways of essentially having a one-to-one buyer through open auction. You can just create an inclusion list and put one site on there, but then you don't get any of the benefits we spoke about around data and analysis, etc. So there needs to be an added value. So if you're paying more direct, it needs to be because is it preferred deals? So are you higher up in the waterfall? Are they guaranteeing you kind of performance benchmarks which you just simply cannot hit within the open market? Or is it just inventory that you're tapping into which isn't available in the open market? For example, some of the premium news brands, publishers in the UK, Telegraph and Guardian, they have kind of limited pre-roll inventory. They tend to sell out. So if you can't buy that on the open market, then you're going to go via a direct route. Then that's again the tangible benefit. So don't mind paying more if you're paying for something.
I think you mentioned something really important, and it's how the publisher organize their inventory, which is for me the most valued added here. So when you go direct and you have that conversation and you're gonna start working with the publisher, you need to understand as well from the demand side. If you have the first impression, how the waterfall is, if it's a waterfall right on the inventory, and that's exactly the key point here. That's exactly the most important part to understand from demand and supply.
Sean, so it's not as simple as you want to not, the direct flight is too expensive. Let's take, we're the one where we have to stop 2 or 3 times, and less expensive is always better. There's enough benefit that you're willing to increase the cost, increase the price, as long as there's guarantees and transparency. And You know, you mentioned in earlier statement, you know, that the layering of data was important. So I'm wondering what data right now becomes more valuable in a direct relationship.
Yeah, I think the data piece that I was referring to is what am I delivering? What outcome am I delivering? How am I bringing it back to that? So use the, let's stick with that analogy, and this could go horribly wrong when you do a live analogy, right? But you said direct versus indirect, the indirect flight. So let's look at the data. I take a direct flight, right? I get to my destination quicker. My wife's not moaning at me and my kids aren't grumpy. That's the data, right? They're the data points. But I've spent 30% more, right? So then now I take the indirect flight, I've saved 50%, but I'm sleeping on the sofa for the first 2 nights of my holiday, right? And my kids are just in a real foul mood. I need to understand, you know, from the return on investment, what's driving me, that's gonna drive my decision. And obviously, naturally, the return on investment is I'm going on holiday to relax. So therefore, actually, I'm gonna go for that expensive one because I don't want to sleep on the sofa and I want my kids to be in a good mood, right? So we bring that down to our day to day. Our day to day is that we've got to deliver business outcomes for our clients. So Richard's got to deliver, you know, a certain amount of handsets and contract pay as you go things and whatever it is. And so what's the best way to do it? The cheapest way isn't always the best way, right? Sometimes you pay more, but you're able to deliver a better ROI. So it's got to be data driven in terms of your decisions. Decisions shouldn't be made based on, oh my gosh, everybody's talking about transparency and supply chain, so I've got to do it, or the ISBA report, so I've got to do it. It's got to be driven. It's got to be driven from there, right? And actually, it's a good point, actually, and it's a nice segue to talk about. You spoke about at the beginning around why are we seeing the industry kind of go towards this? That, you know, what are the driving factors could be a question, right? What are the driving factors to go there? And when you look at those driving factors, invariably, most people probably say, well, trust and transparency and, you know, the ability to go on premium content. And they're not necessarily wrong, right? But if I was to, I guess, be intentionally controversial or maybe provocative, maybe, I would say actually a lot of the driving factor is probably a lack of understanding. And, you know, that is Brian Price, what was how PwC report came out probably about 4 months ago. And actually a lot of the conversation was around the amount of money that's getting taken and where's your money going, etc. And actually you should be focusing on P&Ps of open market. But the reality is that people are not understanding full end of the report, full end of that supply path, full end of what value does everyone that supply path give me, right? And so then people are saying, okay, you know what? I want to understand all the fees down that supply path, so I'm going to go direct. And that's not wrong, right? But actually, you can still go open market and understand that supply path. That whole piece is called supply path optimization. Yes, you might need to partner with a blockchain-esque technology, but you could do that to understand that. So you can understand those fees and optimize it in that supply path optimization project. And you can do that in a direct world and an open market world.
You know, I'm not going to connect. I'm saying I'm not going to connect your children with clients. Not going to make that connection at all. But let's go to a client, Rich. So at the actual brand level, like, so I want to sort of jump on that transparency theme. You know, what I hear from agencies a lot is transparency is an issue. But then when I talk to a brand, it's not necessarily the first thing they talk about. It's not what they really say. It's not really what they're asking for. So I'm wondering where does transparency lie in this more direct relationship for you? How are you thinking about this? What do you need to know and that can't be solved? Which what Sean was just saying, which with open market sort of dynamically understanding it through, finding the right partners, finding the right technology to help you versus just going direct. What more transparency are you looking for, I guess? And then is that being answered correctly by just going direct, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think because Vodafone have in-housed their kind of biddable media, and part of the reason for that was because of to be transparent, so we can run it in-house. We have to rely on kind of agencies and what they tell us is happening, and going by their kind of business models. We wanted to do that and kind of lead the way. So I think that's where the priorities in transparency changes between kind of different brands. I think it's depending on kind of where they are, how developed they are in terms of who's buying their media. Ultimately, it's a black box. Sometimes programmatic if it's going through an agency, whereas if you bring it in-house, you kind of have all the levers at your feet to be able to kind of instigate change. And I think there are a lot of leading industry initiatives like the ISBA report, which came back and spoke about the unknown delta in regards to transparency, which Vodafone were a part of. There's obviously blockchain, which Sean spoke about. You've gone to that transparency piece, but you're right that we are limited in on the buy side in what information we have, because we can get certain levels from the DSP in terms of reporting and data. Log level files aren't always available to you. So I think to move the transparency conversation on, I think there needs to be a real shift in emphasis around, and it is happening. And I think programmatic is kind of entering that maturity stage where they understand that transparency is a key to kind of long-term growth and sustainability. And I think we kind of are moving away from this murky, shadowy world where people kind of operate in the shadows and into a kind of a medium where both sides of the industry, sell side and buy side, are kind of working together to give us the tools available to us in relation to transparency. And I think we're together pushing that forward.
Can I challenge sorry, and it's not necessarily a topic at hand, but I sit in an agency group.
Yeah.
And yeah, you probably knew I was going to go there.
I knew you was going to,
because you said that in the agency, sometimes it's a black box, and you're right. Sometimes it is. But
sometimes that's wanted. It doesn't need to be, but sometimes it's wanted by the advertiser. Sometimes the advertiser's like, do you know what? Oh, that wasn't a criticism. It's just I think sometimes a circumstance that an advertiser doesn't want to answer those questions, doesn't need to answer those questions. There's the budget, right? And other advertisers are a bit further along than actually what's happening here. So I think it just depends on the relationship. There's been a lot of non-disclosed to disclosed models in the industry. I know that's kind of fading away now. So when there's a lot of non-disclosed models, I think obviously that raises questions too.
And I just think that's the piece. For anybody listening out there might be clients that think, okay, so the agencies are black box. I would just bring clarification to that agencies, and I'm talking about the whole world of agencies, have two models: a disclosed model and an undisclosed model. The non-disclosed model typically is a black box, but they're probably selling on business outcomes. Anyway, if you're any sort of agency that has any sort of reputable product suite, if you're not selling non-disclosed and just keep a margin, we're selling it on a, pay us every time we deliver X, right? And they're putting their skin in the game, so to speak. And then you've got the disclosed model, right? Which is not a black box. It's completely transparent, and you should be able to get every single thing you want to see in terms of data charges, tech charges, what's optimizing, what's not, what's working, what's not. Essentially, that disclosed model is like your in-house solution, right? So Richard's running an in-house team for Vodafone. So clients can do that, and we actually help people actually help them when they want it in-house. But some clients don't want it in-house because they don't have the capabilities, the money, and the infrastructure. So then agencies offer a disclosed model, and that idea of that disclosed model is an extension of that client team. They essentially work for the client, right? And that is almost an in-house model, but it's just ran within the agency, right? So I just want to kind of clear that there, just in case anyone was listening and thinking, oh my gosh, agencies are like, I sit in an agency group, so I am defending all agencies because I believe all agencies have two models, a disclosed and a non-disclosed. So.
I would like to add, sorry, Michael, just one thing. It's basically to share what I'm seeing. For example, in Spain, we are seeing this transparency. It's getting more important on a daily basis. It's true, like if we take a look at years ago, that was not in our daily basis. And as you mentioned, we had different models. At least here in Spain, what we see in the industry in general, so agency side, publisher side. So we are talking about this transparency from my side, so supply side, we work exclusively with the partners and we talk about the premium list. We talk about that contextual targeting. We talk about like content. So the user, obviously, it's really important and it's changing on a daily basis as well. Like, the experience on internet. And if you put yourself on the shoes of the supply and on the agency side, I think the transparency. I wouldn't say 100% right now, but it's super important on a negotiation and on the advertiser side. They're looking for a transparent way to buy and a transparent way to as well execute, you know, the PMPs. So I think it's great and important, at least in Spain. I see this on a daily basis. Yeah.
Well, can I just follow up on that? So in a conversation about directness and going to the publisher directly, you know, Taboola isn't an owned and operated publisher, right? Like it's not like you're not CNN, you're not BBC, right? You're Taboola.
Yes.
Can you explain how agencies speak to you and how you help them understand? I mean, this is gonna be like a plug for you, frankly, but like, how do you help them understand how you are a direct partner in this, or do you get sort of, and do you get clouded in the sort of messy middle that exists that Sean and Rich are trying to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, we are not an aggregator, so we work exclusively with the publishers, right? So just to give you an example, if an advertiser wants to do a PMP directly, if El Mundo in Spain, for example, it has to go through Taboola in our widget or feed, which is the placement we have below the article. So it's exclusive partnership, and we monetize directly this specific placement from the big publishers around the world, right? So the value is there. I mean, we help the publisher to grow. We help the publisher on native in content and discovery. So as I said, for me, it's we negotiate directly. So answer your question, we negotiate directly with agencies, with advertisers. So we are there for the buyers, and we close the agreements, we close the deals directly with them. I'm offering the value of the inventory exclusively from Taboola in a transparent way, and the demands. I mean, the buyer and the agency can see every single website and placement they're gonna target on a PMP or any other like a programmatic deal that they want to have with us. So yes, I think since we are not reselling and we sell directly and we have these agreements with the publisher, from my point of view, is different and valued like at the, you know, for the advertisers.
So Rich, Sean, hearing that and thinking about how you're trying to slim down your supply chain, as I think, Sean, you've been saying that supply chain. I love it, thinking about it like a supply chain. How are you working with platforms like Taboola? And if not, why not? Because my feeling is that as you start going more and more direct, and you start looking for direct publishing partners or platform partners, you're going to lose some things, right? You're going to lose some scale, especially right away, because how many individual publishers can you negotiate with every single year to try to get those better rates and get that more transparency and get the data and everything else, right? It becomes more complex. You're going to need to have more people to do all those negotiating. Rich, I want to start with you, actually. How do you slim down your supply chain without losing scale at the very least, and then potentially others?
I think initially, we're looking at the SSPs, the exchanges that we're predominantly working with, and I think historically there's hundreds, but you run with 10, 20, maybe 30, and I think they used to just facilitate the buying, and that's the value that they added. But in more recent times, as transparency becomes key, and as the technology evolves, the exchange no longer just facilitates kind of your media buyer. They're not just sitting there in the background, they're actually at the forefront, and you can kind of work with those guys directly to kind of elevate your media buyer and to actually add value to the media buyer. And if you condense down the amount of SSPs that you're working with to maybe a handful, maybe a dozen or so, then you can extract value from each one of those and have more control of your media buyer without, to your point, talking to so many different partners. And obviously, when it comes to publishers, there's going to be naturally, 80% of your spend probably goes through 20% of your publishers as a loose rule of thumb. So in that regards, there's still not too many kind of players to talk to when you're talking about adding value at publisher level. I think initially though, going through a limited amount of SSPs is the way that we're kind of looking to reduce our and keep our supply chain transparent and optimized.
Sean?
What Richard said wasn't wrong. I guess when you start with a sentence like that, Richard.
Good to know.
When you start a sentence like that, you know there's going to be a but, don't you? What Richard said wasn't wrong. However, my question or rhetorical, is why should we reduce it? Why should we reduce that, right? Because the question's asked like we should be doing it, right? So why should we? And I say that in a, I'm happy for it was answered, but in a rhetorical way, but because there's instances where you might want to, so let me think, Vodafone, you might want to access, I don't know, eBay for people that are buying handsets offline, and you want to get them on a, what do you call it, a SIM only contract, right? So that might be a good site you want to access. eBay is probably affiliated to, you probably know this, Richard, probably every SSP, right? But for whatever reason, ultimately what you want from eBay is to find users that have high propensity to buy that SIM card only contract, SIM card only deal for you. And for whatever reason, although they have access to all these SSPs, on a Tuesday, when you do the route from trying to access eBay and it goes through Rubicon, versus another day when it goes through Programmatic or OpenX and you name the rest, one might outperform the other. So now us just saying, okay, we want to reduce it, and I'm reducing these three, which is OpenX and Rubicon, for example. That particular user that you could have got for whatever reason, and you know, there's smart people out there that are probably saying, this is why, Sean, you're an idiot, fair enough. But for whatever reason, you've now not given the technology to optimize the ability to get that user on that particular supply path that was going to perform better. So I just don't think, again, going back to one of my initial arguments at the beginning, it's not one size fits all. Having said all of that, what we are doing is very similar to what Richard's doing on some of our clients. We are reducing SSPs. We are looking at what SSPs and what supply paths are driving us to conversions. So to understand how do we reduce in certain instances. But I'm just very conscious that as an industry, we hear things, we read things, and we just kind of make blanket approaches to stuff. And I don't think the blanket approach is always right. And I'm not saying you're saying that, Richard, by the way, but I'm just saying in general. So there's a definite need to really try and understand what is driving success, what's driving performance, and making decisions based on data.
Yeah, and I think that is key in reducing the amount of SPOs you're working. You need to kind of do an RFP, sorry, and look at what value they're adding and look at those buying routes and see if a duplication is needed, or if you're using 5 SSPs who offer you the same service, then that's when you kind of need to make that decision. And then if you're not going to reach that user, then is the direct buying route preferential, and can you do that outside the open market, which can add value too.
Well, if you have the right partners, let's go back to that, because there was an interesting comment that was made about, maybe we all go direct, great, but then if you had the right partners, maybe you would stay in more open. Like maybe you just need to find the right people who are analyzing, like right companies who are analyzing, who are creating the right blockchain algorithms or AI or machine learning type stuff to help you better purchase your advertising, versus having to just go swing all the way to one way just because the trend is happening like that. Maybe Pilar, maybe you could answer some of that. Like, would it be better just to like have it all be in the, have the technology improve? Like, are we gonna see this pendulum swing back? Really, frankly, is the question for everybody. Like, are we gonna see it? This is great. This trend is happening next couple of years, and then all of a sudden things get smarter on the technology side, and we end up going all, trending back. Are we gonna have this panel in 3 years saying, shit, we're going the other way now?
Yeah, I think, and I would like to ask the demand side as well. I'm really interested in knowing what they think. But what I think is when a company offers you that value, the technology, like the artificial intelligence, the scale, the service, when everything is there, it's really easy, right? To just like work directly, let's say, with a platform that you within one click, you just have access to the premium inventory, and they help you through the negotiation and as I said, the service. So my question is more for them. I want to understand how they see this and what would be the difference between just deal with the platform rather than go publisher by publisher by publisher and do like different negotiations? How do you see more in the demand side?
I think Richard's still on mute. I think he wants me to take that first. And it looked like you gave me a little look, Rich. So you sure you take that one?
Wink.
I would say it's a really interesting question. And I think there's a question around how do we scale opportunities when we're going, like you said, to have a publisher by publisher, and what some demand partners are doing, and we're doing that as well. Probably less so for maybe, I can't talk for Richard, someone who just representing one brand, but what we're doing across Matterkind, who we represent multiple brands, is we're creating curated marketplaces. So it's almost the best of both worlds. It's almost like a hybrid in between. Because like you said, if you go publisher by publisher, that's an issue. That's an issue for many reasons, because how do you scale that quick? Also, are there going to be technical issues? We all know every trader out there or programmatic specialist out there will talk about the issues with troubleshooting deal IDs and PNPs. So the middle ground is probably around that curated marketplace, where you have essentially a curated marketplace of a portfolio of premium publishers, which is essentially direct, but it's all kind of like one premium marketplace that has a portfolio of inventory. That answers your question.
Sean, can I just follow up with you? Are you creating that yourself? Is Matterkind creating their own curated marketplaces, or are they relying on partners like SSPs and others to do that for you, and you're trusting them to do that for you? Or are you analyzing every single publisher on a very long tail to try to figure out what publishers are right for each and every single curated marketplace deal?
I think, again, a really good question, right? And loads of good questions today, right? But a really good question. And I would say from a SSP or technology provider standpoint, we're using them to facilitate, or rather to give us the infrastructure to do it. I.e., you might use Xandr. Xandr's got their curated marketplace, or you might use the SSP functionality that has the ability to do, and it's called different things, different SSP, like, but a group deal, right? To use them to facilitate it.
Yeah, you might use Smart. Yeah.
Yeah, or Smart. Sorry, I'm so bad. I've actually mentioned so many companies and not mentioned Smart. Oh my gosh, let's rewind.
It was like I was waiting.
Yeah, sorry. I know you should have direct messaged me. I'll tell you what. Let me start that again. You might use other companies like a Smart, for example. Smart is absolutely awesome to facilitate and use that methodology to do that. And different companies call that maybe group IDs. But the actual sourcing, to your point around the long tail, making sure it's the right inventory, is premium, to Richard spoke about earlier. We in particular, and I can't talk about every group, have a division called Magna, and Magna is media brand, essentially trading arm that kind of vets those inventory and kind of helps us do that. But then also Matterkind is part of a company called Kinesso, and Kinesso have something called Kinesso Marketplace, which again is very similar to Magna, but more around vetting inventory around quality and in-campaign metrics such as viewability in there. So then we could group inventory based on that. So we've got two sets of resources that we can use to create our curated marketplace. But we do it internally from an IPG standpoint. But we use the technology companies that you spoke about to help, like Smart, to facilitate that.
Let me shift to the challenge side, because we've been very positive. This entire almost hour has been very positive about this trend, and we like it a lot, apparently. But and return on ad spend, great, wonderful for the brand side, and along with transparency and data and the higher CPMs and higher fill for everybody. I mean, this is a wonderful world that we are moving towards, apparently. But what's the downside? There has to be, right? There has to be a negative. There has to be a challenge. There has to be something that isn't quite there yet that we're suffering through as this trend continues, that needs to be improved. Rich, what do you? I'll call on you first. What? And I want everyone to answer this for themselves. But what do you see as some of the bigger challenges with moving a majority of your business into more direct relationships?
I think the technology in itself, whilst it's kind of moving forward, I think Sean or Pilar mentioned it earlier in regards to troubleshooting deal IDs, and I think there's less issues in terms of spend when it comes to open market buys. So I think that we're always in the near future anyway going to have troubleshooting issues, and that really can disrupt the flow. And it sounds kind of insignificant, you troubleshoot the deal and then you move on, but like if you're predominantly buying through this kind of buying route, then it does disrupt the flow of the campaign and can start to hinder your KPIs and overall effectiveness of your campaigns. I think that's definitely for me the standout one.
Is that technology or is that people? What do you think at this point? Is that like the partners that you choose more than the technology, or is it technology more than partners?
Yeah, probably both. And I think that's why there's a QA process, right? Because there's people make mistakes and you go through, you haven't got a box ticked, and potentially that can solve the problem. But at the same time, you're going through DSP to SSP to publisher. There's a lot of steps in the chain for the whole bid request to make its way through, and lots of data touch points online for it to work effectively. So I think for me, that's probably the biggest barrier to moving buying routes from open to PMP and to PG even.
I think Richard makes a good point around the QA process. I love the fact that you asked Michael about people technology, because the reality is that you can't have one without the other. I remember a day when, because I was here from the genesis of Programmatic, right? And my team used to always have this funny joke, because we used to be media buyers and we used to buy red inventory, and they were all like, "Oh, programmatic buy-in coming to mean we're all going to get our job." And we used to go programmatic buy-in, and we used to act like a robot, say like taking our jobs, come and take our jobs. But the reality is that you can't have one without the other, right? Just look at the banking industry. You walk into a bank 10 years ago, you just saw cashiers everywhere, right? You walk in there now, you see self-checking machines, but who do you see right next to the self-checking machines? People, right? Because you need people, you need technology, and that's a powerful thing. And I say powerful because it means we're important too, right? It means our teams are important as well as this technology.
But I would say no one is still standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange anymore. Like there's nobody there, right? And everything has gone into more of a algorithmic based trading, or it's not as in person as it once was. So it has changed, right? Those jobs have changed, but there still are more people than any of us like to admit, I think, working on programmatic, that's for sure.
So I actually love the fact that you mentioned that example, because I didn't know that. That was a real surprise to me. So I was thinking, wow, because when I think of the New York Stock Exchange, I still think of everyone like that. But actually, you're right. But what you probably have got on the floor is different types of people. You've not got the people doing that because they're behind keyboards at home, actually, in the pandemic doing it, right? Through their technology. But you've got probably IT people on the ground there. You've got different types of people. So it's still people though, it's human beings. But what's different is the skill sets different that's needed, right? And so now when you bring that back to our industry, it just means that we've got to continue to evolve and keep on learning new things, because we're going to need to learn new things if we're going to keep up.
I think that's actually a great message in this environment, that people still matter, right? You can't just move into technology, but that people are still required. We still need to hire people for maybe perhaps new jobs. I think that's really great sentiment. So thank you. Pilar, what do we didn't get to you from a challenge perspective.
Sure.
What are the challenges on your side? Oh.
Yeah, sorry. First, I totally agree with what you said, Seun. I mean, to solve real problems, we need real people. And we see this every day. And I still remember a long time ago, when we started talking about programmatic, how people were super scared that what is going to happen with the job, like everything is going to be programmatic, what I'm going to do, right? And I think at that time, the message we gave them, or the message we needed to share in the industries, we really need the people working on this. So you just don't make a deal and forget it, and you just plug and play and go to the beat, right? I wish it's like that, but it's not. So you need people, you need the team more than ever. You have the technology, but these people need to convert, right? A more technical, maybe, or more like programmatic environment, because programmatic is here to stay, and it's increasing, and it would be a time that it would be maybe, I don't know, more than 80% programmatic when these people are going to be working on the programmatic environment. So that's one, and I think that's the message. And I've been seeing this for a long time when people were scared, and I think now people understand more, because we're in a more mature environment, and that's my answer to that. And second thing, the challenge, obviously, travel student who doesn't be in a situation where you don't know what is going on and you have a PMP you need to deliver. And I guess from the supply side, you don't have the whole visibility of the DSP setup, which is really important. And sometimes, and from my experience, maybe the troubleshooting or what happened is you don't know exactly what the DSP or the buyer or the agency or the client, is putting as a setup. So this is something really important, and the communication here is 100% something I would recommend to avoid any PMP troubleshooting here, because I fixed a lot of things talking directly to the person who is setting up the campaign in the DSP. So that's one. And then I guess right now we're in a more professional environment in Programmatic too, and the supply has access or that visibility in a different way. And we can solve the issues in a much better position. And again, with the people we have in the team working on this.
Well, I love, first of all, I love the quote, to solve real problems, you need real people. I think that's great. But we often talk about supply path optimization. We don't really talk about demand path optimization. We don't talk about the sort of black box that was spoken about earlier enough, right? We talk about how we go direct through supply partners, but not on the demand side. So that's interesting. Maybe for another panel, because we're coming to a close here, we can have another one on that. I'll invite you guys all back for that one. We do have only less than 10 minutes. I noticed that there's no questions in the Q&A. If anybody watching wants to ask a question, please use the Q&A button on the bottom right hand of your bottom center of your screen and ask a question. I'm happy to ask it right now, but I'll ask a final one right now, and if there are questions, I'll add them in after. We're headed to the end of the year. It's December, thank God. 2020 is over, so 2021 can't come soon enough, I guess, for everybody. Let's talk about some predictions. So what is your best prediction? Will this trend continue? I think the answer is probably yes, but what's the next phase of this? Or maybe if you disagree, maybe you think the pendulum, like we said earlier, will swing back and AI, machine learning improves algorithmic trading, and then we maybe move in a completely different direction or back to where we were. What are your predictions? Let's go with Rich. Let's go with you first.
Predictions. I do predict it will continue, and I think as more and more people starts to buy via direct channels over that, and predominantly programmatic guaranteed, I think. And what I'd like to see is programmatic being used not just as a performance channel. I think everyone initially in its genesis, it was just a performance-led channel. It was low CPMs. It was race to the bottom. It was reach as much people as you want. But I think now, with the option to go PG and the innovative high impact formats that are available to us, and it's still not just display now, it's video as well, and it's connected TV, and it's out of home. I'd like to see it, move more into a branding channel and really deliver a full funnel campaign through programmatic advertising.
Sean, let's go to you next. Predictions.
I do like what you said, Richard, actually, and I'm going to add to that in a second. But I think ultimately, the future will, in my opinion, be dictated by the imminent demise of the third-party cookie, right? And the need to rely on first and second-party data lends itself to a direct world. So the future, in my opinion, will go to all that way. But I think to that point Richard made, that when we're talking here on this panel, it's a bit siloed, right? Because in reality, when you break down what we're talking about, we're really talking about display native and maybe a bit of video. But actually, when you think about the future, and actually we're pivoting to making programmatic a banned word in Matterkind, because we now do all addressable channels. So because when people talk about programmatic, they associate programmatic to a channel. We know that it's not a channel, it's a way of buying, right? So for that reason, we've just made it banned word, and we talk about it as addressable. And really, the future is around how are we accessing and finding our customers and creating meaningful moments for them, right? And that's across, like Richard said, out of home, TV, audio, display, video native. And so then now when you think of that world, the future in that world is going to be so different. And I mentioned at the beginning, it's not one size fits all, but direct world lends itself to display, video native. But actually, in a world where you've got I don't know, audio, that audio world essentially already is direct. You don't really have an open market, right? But in a out of home world, you're starting to see that natural kind of almost open exchange world happening there. So every medium or channel is going to progress in different ways. But the future for me is actually a lot of these programmatic specialists really driving that agenda in these new medium and emerging channels.
Pilar, do you want to take a crack at a quick future? We have a couple of questions from the crowd as well. So
yeah, all has been said. So I agree with what you said. Just to mention that native, it's important that programmatic and native together. It's an amazing combination. I obviously see this with my eyes on a daily basis, and this is also getting like a lot of importance in the industry and in every market. And yes, obviously the answer would be the trends. We can always see a switch, but I wouldn't say that. My view on this is we will be seeing how this trend is getting bigger and hopefully on the industry, like in a real, position every day.
So thank you. So two questions from the audience. The first one I'll direct to Sean actually, because I think this is an interesting one for you. Why should brands, agencies care about SSP take rates? When you go to a store, you don't care how much the store bought the item for, only how much you're going to have to pay for it. So like I would ask you in the context of your original example, we'll bring it all the way back. If you go to Expedia or some sort of, site to go buy your plane ticket, do you care how much Expedia has to pay to the airline, how much rev share they do, or do you just care that's the right price? Why should you care? Why should
it's a great question, and actually, because you framed it like that, it's made me now think of a different answer. Because my initial answer was going to be like, yeah, you should care for these reasons. But when you framed it like that, it changed my mindset. And actually, it's really good panels like this because it makes people start thinking in different ways. Because ultimately, on that holiday, I want to get a direct flight because I want my wife to be happy, my kids to be happy, but I want it at the best value possible. So the best value possible might be for an OTA, an aggregator like Expedia, a Podo, or it might be direct through BA or whoever it is. But what I care about is my direct flight at the cheapest possible. So if Expedia gives me the cheapest possible, I don't really care what they take. But if I get it BA or Virgin Media and I get it there cheaper, I don't care what they do, what they have, right? I don't care because I know my outcome I want is a happy wife, happy kids, and me to get a holiday direct for the cheapest. That's my business outcome I want to deliver. So it's really interesting that you asked a question like that because I was literally going to answer a completely different way. But if I was going to answer a completely different way, I was initially going to say, yeah, it's good for them to understand what all the fees are for this whole transparency world, but it's understanding the value that these entities give us. Because when you understand the value, actually the price that it puts to it is almost irrelevant. You buy a newspaper, you don't start saying how much was the paper, how much was the ink, how much was the printer. You don't say that. You just buy the newspaper because you value the Times. Your Times reader, you value it, or your Guardian reader, you value it. You don't go up saying, okay, how much did you pay the journalist? How much did you don't do that. So it's argument for both sides, right?
Well, we all inherently believe in fairness, right? And we're all trying to be the best people possible, but fairness for everybody else, but maybe not fairness for ourselves. We want things cheaper for us, for when you're buying your own products. So it's an interesting sort of psychological thing when it comes to buying. Rich, the next question for you directly, audience guaranteed, which you mentioned earlier in the panel, and Melissa wanted you to share some examples of what type of buy would include and how it's different from other programmatic deals.
Yeah, so audience guaranteed is essentially when you're guaranteeing a volume of inventory against a kind of a pre-selected audience. PG you may buy across the Guardian site as a whole, but with audience guaranteed you can look to layer in your first party data, so you match up your kind of CRM database with a publisher's database, and they're able to tell you, whilst you still have cookies, what percentage of their audience they're able to reach, and they can say we can get X amount to spend away over 6 weeks, and that essentially is you guaranteeing an audience, a first-party audience that's important to you against a certain selected inventory source. And you can also do it in kind of the DoubleClick DV360 with their third-party data, with their kind of free off-the-shelf in-market and lifestyle segments too. So there's different ways to kind of guarantee your audience with certain publishers.
And go for it.
So look, I was just going to add to the previous question as well. I think, and that's where the value comes in. It's business, right? Everything's up for negotiation, and that's where it comes to streamlining your SPO process, because that can potentially come into any negotiation if you're looking to spend increased amounts of money with certain publishers or through certain buying routes. And that's the value that exactly the take rate and decreasing that and making sure more of your pound gets to the publisher in question, so more value for you as an advertiser. I think that's where that simplicity and transparency of the supply chain comes into play.
And I would hate for any of our millions of viewers today to not have one of their questions answered. So the last question, and Pilar, I'd love for your answer on this, because you're the one who has to reach out to direct advertisers, trying to set up PMPs. What's the best way for a small or medium-sized publisher to reach out to them, to contact them, to get their attention? What's the best way?
Well, it's a great question. I would say over Zoom right now. I mean, jokes apart. What I would say honestly is it really depends on the strategy on the publisher side that you have. We mentioned, the waterfall, we mentioned SSP, we mentioned if you work with a provider. But I think from, we are seeing how the publishers and advertisers are connected and creating PMPs and creating great stories. So, I mean, from my point of view, and obviously from Taboola, we see this trend on a daily basis and how these programmatic PMPs are increasing. And it really depends on how much inventory would you offer to your programmatic strategy, and how much be testing programmatic and the benefits are there for advertisers, for publishers, and for users. So I would definitely recommend it.
All right, well, we hit the end of the panel. So, well, thank you all for joining us, Pilar, Sean, Rich. If you want to find us, I think Pilar is going to be in San Diego soon. Rich is going to be in the Maldives. Sean is going to be in the Caribbean, and I'll be in Paris as soon as the pandemic is over. So, but thank you all for this, and we'll see you on the next panel.
Lovely. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.